Some of the subject matter in this video may be sensitive to some viewers, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And this event actually took place on New Year's Eve between 1999 and 2000. For those of you who are around back then, you know how big of a deal that specific night was. There was widespread panic because of the banking systems supposedly not being able to handle changing from 99 to 00, and some people thought the world was legitimately going to end because of the new millennium. It was a crazy time, and there were a lot of people either prepping for the end or that were planning on living it up like it was going to be the last night we were alive. Most of us that were in our early 20s were definitely planning on living it up. I would say that we were the original YOLOers. Sorry, I'm old and don't get to use hip lingo like that in my daily life. Anyways, I wasn't the doom and gloom kind of person when this was going on, and I wasn't really afraid of what was going to happen. Now, I'm not a smart person when it comes to computers, and I would never claim to be as smart as those people that wrote the banking software, so I just kind of assumed things would be fine. And, as history would show us, they were. So I'm glad I was right on that assumption. Back in those days, my best friend and I were renting a small house that her uncle owned, and while we weren't the partying type, I had just happened to turn 21 about a month prior, and we both had plans to do something fun on this particular New Year's Eve. My neighbors were throwing a bit of a neighborhood party at one of the houses at the end of the block, and I was all about getting out there to get to know some new people. She had made plans with her new boyfriend and wasn't going to be home that night, so I figured I could have a good time at the party. Well, yes, I was a stupid kid back then. I was also a total lightweight and wasn't dumb. I knew that I needed to take it easy and not get too drunk. The party was actually pretty tame, thankfully. It felt just more like a massive social gathering than a real party. There were people that were getting drunk and acting stupid, sure, but for the most part, we were all just kind of hanging out and getting to know each other. At around 10:30, I decided that I should probably just have a drink myself, that this was a party and I was going to have fun. On my way over to the table, I ran into one of the neighbors that I knew and was talking with him about things. And when I turned to walk over to the drink table, I accidentally smacked face first into another person. I apologized for not paying attention to where I was going. He said it wasn't a big deal and then reached out to introduce himself. He said his name was Ben and that he had moved to the neighborhood recently. I shook his hand, told him my name, and then said that I lived about a block over with a roommate. We talked a bit after I had grabbed my drink, and it kind of felt like we were building a friendship. He was a really nice guy, seemed to be pretty smart, and I thought he was decently attractive, so I was enjoying getting to know him. Ben seemed like the kind of guy that I would hang out with, and like he could be a decent person to possibly make a relationship with. So, with that, and the couple drinks that I'd had, I was definitely letting my guard down while talking to him. We spent a good portion of the night just talking about things, and we even hugged each other at midnight. I wasn't about to kiss a stranger. It was a pretty good night overall, and I had a pretty good time. As the night was winding down, and as I'd had a few drinks, I was kind of feeling like I should wrap up everything, and decided that I would go ahead and start heading home. I mentioned that I wanted to go ahead and head home to Ben, and he asked me if I wanted a ride. I was a bit iffy at first, but in the end, I figured it was better to go ahead and get the ride than walk home slightly drunk in the middle of the night. I took him up on it, and we headed out. Now, I know what a lot of you might be thinking. This was a terrible idea. And it was, but not right away. He drove around to where my house was. I hesitantly pointed to the small blue house that I was living in. He pulled up in front and parked for a moment. I was a bit worried that he was going to try to make a move or ask if he could come in or something. But, thankfully, he told me to have a good rest of my night and that he would see me around. I thanked him for the ride and got out. He drove away and everything seemed like it was going all right. I headed in, got into my pajamas, and then fell into my bed and passed out. I was out cold. After the drinks and it being around 1 in the morning, I was out like a light. And that is, until I started to hear something that pulled me out of my sleep. I wasn't exactly sure what I was hearing, but it was enough to wake me up. I sat up in my bed and groggily looked over at the clock. It was 3:30. I shook the sleep off and tried to look around to see what the hell was making a weird tapping noise. I got up, looked around the house to see what exactly was going on, thinking that maybe the sound was just a fan running or something, but I really could not figure it out. I shrugged it off and went to the bathroom, but the whole time I was sitting there, I just kept hearing this weird tap and click noise. Part of me almost figured it was in my head, or something outside, like a branch on a tree was hitting the siding or something like that. And it stopped after a few more moments, so I seriously just brushed it off. That is, until I walked out into the living room and heard a really loud banging on the door. Obviously, I jumped. I didn't expect someone to be banging on my door at 3 a.m. The banging was immediately followed up by a deep voice saying, "This is the police. Open the door." So, at this point, I will say that I was in a state of half-drunk panic. I had no idea what the hell was going on. I was awoken from a comfortable sleep by a tapping that I couldn't figure out, and now someone claiming to be the police was banging on my door at 3 in the morning. I was hesitant at first, mostly because why would the cops be there? But when I glanced out the window, I noticed that there were 2 cop cruisers sitting out in front of my house, and 2 of the officers were stationed with their weapons ready. I took a deep breath, and I responded by saying something to the effect of, "Who are you with, and why are you here?" He responded with his name and his department, and he told me that I needed to exit the house immediately. I told him I was going to come out and then open the door with my hands up. He quickly grabbed me and pulled me to the side. Then, as quickly as he had gotten me out, 2 other officers ran past me with their weapons up. It was at that point that I realized that there were more than just the 2 cruisers outside. As quickly as this whole thing had happened, it was over, and I learned what exactly was going on. And the officer explained to me they'd gotten a call of a suspicious person in the area from one of the neighbors, and they'd sent a unit out to investigate. When they were driving around, they actually saw the person that was being reported trying their damnedest to pry the basement window open. That is what prompted them to call for more units, and as soon as they parked to confront the person, he had managed to get the window open and got into the basement. That's when they noticed that I was walking around. They said they'd seen me walk into the kitchen from the hallway and knew that the person they'd seen was a guy, so he started banging on the door to get my attention. as I'm sure you can assume, the person that had broken in was Ben, the nice guy that I'd met at the party. What's worse, when they pulled him out of the house, he had a duffel bag with him that had a bunch of things indicating that he was planning on this break-in to become a kidnapping, including duct tape, rope, a map of the area, and a few other things. I really thought that Ben was an okay person at first, and I was stupid enough to take him up on the ride, but in the back of my mind, I actually think that that was the best thing to do. Thinking back, my other option was to walk home, tipsy, in the dark, and I feel like he would have had a better chance to grab me in that situation. I think him taking me home and then not trying anything was his way of getting me to let my guard down. Or maybe it was a spur of the moment, hey, let's kidnap the girl that I met this evening kind of plot. I honestly don't know. Lesson learned from this: don't get in cars with strangers at parties. Unless that stranger is from Uber, in which case you're probably safe. I have a really strange New Year's Eve story that may not be creepy in and of itself, but it's one of those stories that has always been on my mind, and to me, it was seriously freaky. This all happened about a decade ago. I think it was New Year's Eve of 2010. I was a young guy, living by myself in a cheap and pretty crappy apartment. 2 years prior to that, I had been in a pretty bad accident that ended up with me getting a metal plate in my skull and needing reconstructive surgery on my ear, leaving me partially deaf. Because of this, my right ear only functioned at about 10%, so I had to get a hearing aid that kind of helped, but was also kind of annoying. I don't know if it was just the brand or if my particular unit was defective, but I swear almost anything would cause interference with it, and I was always having to adjust it. On this particular New Year's Eve, I was alone, which was not a big deal to me. I kind of liked just spending the time to myself and doing whatever I wanted. I made myself dinner and was watching the news so that I could watch their party, or whatever it was that was leading up to the countdown. A while after, somewhere close to around 11:30 or so, I was watching TV and started getting what almost felt like a panic attack. I was feeling normal one moment, and then the next was feeling like the whole world was crashing down. Now, I've only ever had 1 or 2 actual panic attacks, and the first one ended up with me going to the ER because I was freaking out and thinking I was dying. But, thankfully, that taught me how to realize what they were and how to best handle them. The main thing that I've found helps me is to get somewhere that is significantly cooler than where I am. Almost like I'm overheating and just need to cool off. It being the end of December, the coolest place I could think to go was outside. So I grabbed my jacket and decided I would go out for a nice, almost midnight stroll just to clear my head. I got outside and started walking down toward the small park in the area. I figured I could just walk the path around it a couple times, and it would calm me down. As I was walking down the street, I started getting those interference issues with my hearing aid, and I was actually regretting wearing it out, as it was obviously going to be more of an annoyance than anything. I adjusted it and kept on, but the further I went, the more and more the hearing aid started picking up something that was loud and staticky. Even though I turned it down to the lowest that I could before just straight turning it off, it was still getting hit with that interference. It was quiet enough that I was able to mostly ignore it and move on. That is, until I actually got out to the park. As I got there, I noticed that even on the lowest setting, there was a shrill, damn near deafening high pitched screech. It really wasn't helping my anxiety, so I just pulled it off my ear and said screw it before turning it off. As I was aggressively turning the little wheel to shut it off, I noticed that the park wasn't as dark as it should have been. This small park only had one streetlight in the parking lot, and nothing on the trails or the playground, mostly because it's supposed to be closed after dark, and it's really not that big. I started thinking that maybe they'd installed a new light or something when I looked up. And that's where everything got weird. I have no idea what exactly it was that I was looking at. There was an incredibly bright white light just kind of hovering above me. What was really weird about it was bright and right there, but at the same time, it almost looked like it was also in the sky. I know that makes no sense, but the best way for me to put it was that while I was staring at it, I lost all sense of depth perception. This light was both right in front of my face and several hundred feet above me at the same time. Something about this light was absolutely enough to suck my attention away from everything else. I felt like it was staring at me. As weird as that may sound, it just kind of hovered there, wherever there was, and it almost looked like it was slowly rotating or shifting in a spherical manner. I honestly could not take my eyes off of it. Like, I physically could not look away from this thing. I wish I could explain more about this whole situation, but that was pretty much all there was to it. It was somewhere between 5 to 10 seconds of me just staring blankly at this glowing thing that confused my brain. And then as quickly as I noticed it, it was completely gone. I stood there dumbfounded and genuinely confused. What's worse, there wasn't anyone else out at the park. It was almost midnight on New Year's Eve, so everyone was home or partying for the countdown. So I was the only person that witnessed this thing. To this day, I have no earthly idea what exactly it was, and I have no evidence that it happened, other than a broken hearing aid, which completely stopped working after this event. I'm not a huge believer in the supernatural, but I don't know if this thing was paranormal, or an alien craft, or something from the other side that had crossed over and then left. If anyone else has ever had an experience like this, I would love to know about it, because this event was genuinely freaky for me and is something that I still cannot explain. I have a story that happened on New Year's Eve way back in the day. By back in the day, I mean the 80s, back when I was about 19 years old and still lived with my mom and dad. I was actually preparing to move out and get my own place, since I'd gotten a decent job right out of high school, and I'd been able to save up a good amount of money, thanks solely to my parents not kicking me out the minute I had turned 18. Though I could promise you, they probably wanted to. I have an older brother that was 22 at the time, and he and I never really got along in any capacity. He was always the bully, and I was always the one getting in trouble for his BS, which definitely left a bitter taste in my mouth when it came to doing anything with him. To this day, we still don't really talk, and I no longer live in the same state as him nor my parents. I kind of moved my life forward and decided I wanted to do my own thing in the world. It's not really important, but it does paint that I was always a bit of a black sheep when it came to my family. On this particular year, my mother and father were planning on going out to a party with my father's coworkers, and since I had worked all day and was just getting home as they were getting ready to leave, I decided I was just going to stay home and watch TV instead of doing anything for the night's festivities. I was drained, and I was thinking that falling asleep on the couch was a better idea than partying with my parents and other people their age. And they finished getting dressed, told me to have a good night, and that they wouldn't be home until around 2 or so, and then left me to sit on the couch and doze off. My dozing didn't last anywhere near as long as I'd wanted it to, as I was interrupted by the sound of the front door unlocking and a familiar voice that I was hoping to not hear. My brother, Brett, and his group of a-hole friends walked in as loudly as they possibly could, causing a nice night of doing nothing to quickly turn into me being annoyed. As soon as they walked in, Brett started in on me for not having a date for the night, for staying home, and then made a comment that even mom and dad were out partying. I shot some choice words at him, and then asked why he was there, to which he replied saying that he and his friends wanted a place to party for the night, and since mom and dad were out, they were going to hang out in the backyard. I rolled my eyes and went back to watching the MTV New Year's Eve bash. He laughed, and the group of them went back into my parents' room and came out with several bottles of alcohol. I once again ignored them, and they all walked out to the backyard. After about 20 minutes of them yelling at each other about whatever it is they were yelling about, I heard Brett shout my name. I huffed, got up and went to the back door, and asked what the hell he wanted. He told me to come out and help them around their bonfire. The bonfire in question was going to literally just be the old metal drum that my parents had that they burned leaves and sticks in from old trees in the yard. I declined in the most polite way that I could, and he told me that, if I helped him, he would let me sit out and drink with them. Now, I hated my brother, and I still do, but something about the allure of being allowed to sit with older guys and drink was an interesting thing to me. I'd literally never drank in my life. I was only 19, and it wasn't something that ever really had come up in my life. Part of me got stuck in that it's what the older guys are doing, and then if I do it, I'll be one of them mindsets. So I told him I would help, but he had to pour me something first. And this was a huge mistake. He poured a mix of several different things, and then handed it to me, and then taunted me, saying that he'd bet that I puked the second I sipped on it. I just stared at him and then literally downed the entire cup, which tasted like actual death. I have no idea what he mixed, but it was like 4 different hard liquors. I barely even made a face, and I just maintained eye contact, which caused him to laugh and tell me to help with the fire. And we all got the wood pieces that were cut up and filled the barrel to the top. And then he poured a bunch of literal gasoline on it and lit it. And the fire caught and was burning pretty nicely. And I was just impressed that he didn't catch himself on fire. As the night went on and we were sitting there, I was pretty much just silently drinking something slowly, and I was feeling the effects of that first thing that he had given me after only a little while. Again, that was the first drink that I'd ever had, and it was something like 2 shots of 4 different liquors all mixed together, so to say that I was a lightweight and that it was hitting me, that would be an understatement. And then being on my second or third drink, I don't recall which, I was probably more than tipsy. That night, I learned 2 things about drinking. When it hits me, it hits me like a bus. And I'm an absolute a-hole when I'm drunk. I don't remember a lot of the night, but I do know that the whole party only lasted about an hour before I started in on my brother about something. From what I've been told, I pretty much just stood up and started calling him names and yelling about him being the favorite. Him being the guy that he is, he decided that he was going to take advantage of my being drunk and angry and make me the butt end of his jokes so that his friends would get a laugh out of the situation. I do have very vague memories of things that were said, but I can tell you right about when my brain kicked back on. It was right when he started yelling at me about how much of a loser I was. I remember him saying something like, "The fact that you still live with mom and dad at 19 shows how much of a loser you really are." Which, for some reason, really hit a nerve. As soon as he finished that sentence, I went on the offensive and started looking for something within my reach to throw at him. Within said reach, there were literally two things: my drink and the fire. And my brain was not making the best decisions. I reached into the barrel, and I grabbed a decent-sized chunk of a log that was burning on one end, which drunk me didn't realize had actually burned my skin at the time. I remember yelling something like, "I wish you would just F off and die," and then heaving the piece of wood as hard as I could at him. Now, I had a really good arm. I'd actually played baseball in high school, but my aim was garbage because of how buzzed I was. When I heaved the burning piece of wood, I missed my brother by literal feet. What I didn't miss was the window that was behind him that went straight into the living room. At first, my mind wanted to go into freak out mode, because I had just broken the window and my parents were going to kill me for it. But then, I noticed the glowing on the other side of the window. It honestly felt like it happened in half a second. I went from yelling, throwing the flaming wood, to watching the living room catch, and let me tell you, there is nothing more sobering than standing in your backyard and watching your childhood home go up in flames. As much as I hate to say it, I just stood there and watched it catch and start to burn more. My brother and his friends tried to get inside to put it out, but whatever I had hit with the log had started burning super fast, and the entire house was filled with smoke, and they couldn't do a damn thing. They had to run next door to tell them to call 911. The firefighters came and tried to put it out, but they took too long to get there to fully save the house. Like I said, I just kind of stood there. And I know some people will judge me for it, but it was such a surreal situation. Everything I had ever owned, ever known, loved, and experienced was going up in flames right in front of me because I did something stupid. This was my fault. For obvious reasons, this was the worst night of my life. I can't even remember anything my parents said when they were contacted and rushed home. I can't remember anything my brother yelled at me. Hell, I don't even remember anything the firefighters or officers that showed up to the scene had told me. I just remember being stuck inside my head and screaming at myself. I will say that the only good thing about this was that no one was hurt or killed, but it was obviously a breaking point for me. I'm not going to bore you with the rebuilding of everyone's life. Just know they moved on, and while it's something that's always killed me inside, I also have moved on. And like I said earlier, I don't much talk to my family anymore, being the black sheep, and I think this was the last straw for them, and I was pretty much ostracized. From this, I learned that I should avoid alcohol, and I haven't had a single drink since that night. And if I had to give a lesson to anyone out there, Drink in moderation and responsibly, and remember that drunks and fire do not mix. Hey there, friendarinos. I hope you all enjoyed this collection of New Year's Eve stories. Stories involving New Year's Eve, as the title would tell you, I guess. Is that why I title these things and make the thumbnail say the things I do? So you guys know what the video's about? That makes a lot more sense than it should. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. You can also subscribe if you're new to the channel. If you're not new, don't subscribe, because that'll make you unsubscribe, and that's not cool, man. That's just not cool. Not cool. Yeah. You can also leave me a comment letting me know what your plans are for the New Year's Eve, if you have any. If you don't have any, that's perfectly fine. Don't think we have any plans either. Still not doing the best, still not 100%, but life goes on. We will be okay. We will persevere, we will push forward, and we will be victorious against whatever it is that is making us have to challenge ourselves. I don't know what the hell I'm saying. Anyways, I love y'all. Hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, again, like, comment, subscribe, smash the like button. Make sure it feels it. Copyright 242. Trademark 242. My brain is frazzled. Love y'all. Hope you have a great day. See you on the next video. But until then, sleep well.